I never believed in saints, not the way others did. I was raised Catholic, baptized before I could walk, but faith never sat right with me. Maybe it was the way the world worked, how prayers seemed to go unanswered, how suffering never seemed to mean anything. That changed when I became a priest, not because I found faith, but because I found something else, something worse. And it all started with a secret buried beneath St. Matthew's Church. St. Matthew's was old, too old. It stood at the heart of a town that felt just as ancient, as though time moved slower there, as though the people had never left the past behind. I was transferred there after my predecessor, Father Moreau, vanished without a trace. No explanation, no goodbyes, just gone. The town barely spoke of him. They barely spoke of anything, really. The people here weren't just religious, they were obsessed. There was something unsettling in their devotion, the way they clung to rituals like their lives depended on it. The first time I walked into the church, I felt it. The air inside was thick, damp, like I had just stepped into a crypt. The wooden pews were dark with age. The stained glass saints stared down at me with hollow eyes, and the stone walls wept with moisture. And then there was the door. It was hidden behind the altar, blending into the dark stone. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't felt the draft. Cold air seeping up from below. No one mentioned it. No one told me what was beneath. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. The townsfolk were strange, but they respected me. Too much, like they feared me. They never missed a sermon. They always prayed in silence, and they always left an offering at the altar. Not money, but something else. Things that didn't belong in a church. Teeth, pieces of bone, bloody cloth. I confronted one of them, a woman named Agnes, after I found a severed rabbit's head beneath a pew. She just smiled. "It's for them, Father." "Who?" Her smile widened. "The ones beneath." That was the first time I heard them. That night, as I lay in bed in the rectory, I heard whispers through the floorboards, a chorus of voices, soft, pleading. I didn't sleep. I had to know. The next evening after Mass, I waited until the church was empty. Then I went to the door behind the altar. It was unlocked. Beyond it, a spiral staircase led down into the dark. The deeper I went, the colder it became. The air smelled wrong, like old blood and damp earth. And then I saw them. The walls were covered in faces. Not paintings, not carvings. Faces, stretched, contorted, embedded in the stone. Their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with agony. Some were fresh, their flesh pale and glistening. Others had decayed, nothing but grinning skulls fused into the walls. I turned to run, and that's when I heard it, a voice whispering behind me. "Stay, Father. You were chosen." I don't know how I got out. I remember running, bursting through the church doors, gasping for air. The townsfolk were waiting, every single one of them. Their expressions were calm, expectant. "You saw," Agnes said. I nodded, unable to speak. "Then you know why you're here." They brought me inside. They sat me down at the altar, and they told me the truth. The town wasn't built around St. Matthew's. St. Matthew's was built to contain something beneath it, something ancient, something hungry. Every century they made an offering, one of their own taken and fused into the walls, joining the countless others in an eternal prison of flesh and stone. That was the covenant of the Hollow Saints, a pact made long ago, a sacrifice to keep the thing below from waking. And this time, it was supposed to be me. I refused. I fought. But they had already made up their minds. They dragged me down the stairs, their hands strong, their grip unbreakable. My screams died in the damp air, swallowed by the walls of writhing faces. The ritual had already begun. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Father Moreau. He was there, embedded in the wall, his face twisted in agony, his lips mouthing a silent warning. Then came the pain. The flesh of my back peeled away, drawn into the stone. My skin stretched, my limbs stiffened. I could feel the others, hundreds of souls trapped, their agony seeping into me. I tried to pray, I tried to scream, but my mouth would never move again. That was 100 years ago. I don't know how much of me is left. The world above is a blur. Faces come and go. The town has changed, but the covenant remains. And now another priest has come. Another man who doesn't believe in saints. I can only watch. I can only wait. Because soon he will believe. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I was just a tattoo artist trying to make a name for myself. I had a small shop, barely scraping by, drowning in bills. I needed something, anything, to set me apart from the competition. Something unique, something powerful. And then I found the book. It was in the basement of my new shop. I had only been open for a month when I decided to clear out the clutter down there. Old furniture, broken mirrors, boxes filled with useless junk. But in the farthest corner, buried beneath a pile of rotting fabric, I found it. The cover was unlike anything I had ever seen. At first, I thought it was just old leather, cracked and yellowed with age. But when I ran my fingers over it, I realized it felt like skin. Human skin. I almost dropped it right then, but something stopped me. Something about the way the light caught the lettering on the cover. The title was written in deep black ink that never seemed to reflect light, no matter which way I turned it. It was in a language I couldn't understand, but as I flipped through the pages, something inside me stirred. The illustrations were intricate, disturbingly realistic. They depicted tattoos coming to life, not just as art, but as flesh, bone, and muscle. One image showed a man with wings inked on his back. The next showed those wings bursting through his skin. Another showed a woman with a snake tattoo curling around her arm. And the next image, the snake was real, its fangs sinking into her neck. At first, I told myself it was just some kind of bizarre historical tattoo guide. But deep down, I knew better. This was something else. Something old. Something powerful. I should have left it there. Should have burned it. Instead, I brought it upstairs. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept flipping through the pages, running my fingers over the strange ink. My skin tingled where I touched it. There were instructions, rituals, for making ink infused with something the book called living essence. It required a few strange ingredients: ashes from burned hair, a drop of fresh blood, and something called the binding mark. I didn't know what that was, but I was curious. Too curious. The next day, my first client came in. Some guy wanting a wolf tattoo on his arm. I decided to test it out. I followed the book's instructions as best I could, mixing the ink with a single drop of my own blood. I told myself it was just for fun, just a superstition. But when I finished the tattoo, something was different. The ink moved, not like normal tattoos where the skin shifts with the muscle. This was something else. It looked like the wolf was breathing. The guy noticed too. He stared at his arm, running his fingers over the ink, his voice shaking. "It feels real," he said. I laughed it off, told him it was just fresh ink, that the skin was raised from the needle. But as he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just done something I wasn't supposed to. Things only got worse from there. Word spread fast. People started coming in, asking for tattoos with the special ink. They didn't know what it was, but they could feel it. Something about the designs felt alive. The shop that was once struggling suddenly had a wait list weeks long. I was making money, more than I ever had. But then my clients started changing. One guy came back a week after getting a dragon tattoo on his chest. He looked sick, pale, sweating through his shirt. He lifted it to show me, and I nearly threw up. The tattoo had grown. The ink had spread, curling across his ribs, his stomach, his throat. The dragon's eyes moved, following me, its mouth twitching as if trying to speak. "I can feel it," he whispered. "It moves when I sleep." I told him I didn't know what was happening, that maybe he needed to see a doctor. But as he turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The edges of the tattoo were sinking into his skin. Like it wasn't just ink anymore, like it was becoming a part of him. I tried to stop. I really did. But the book, it wouldn't let me. Every time I tried to put it away, I'd find it open on my work table. Flip to a new page, new designs, new instructions. And then one night, I woke up to find something moving under my own skin. I rushed to the mirror, pulling up my sleeve. I had never tattooed myself before, but there it was, a swirling black symbol on my forearm, one I had never seen before. The ink pulsed, twisting like veins beneath the surface. I grabbed a knife, tried to cut it out, but the moment the blade touched my skin, I felt something clawing back. The pain was unbearable. I blacked out. When I woke up, the book was open beside me. My hands were covered in ink, and my skin was gone. Not all of it, just a small patch on my arm. But it wasn't raw flesh underneath. It was paper, the same pale yellow texture as the pages of the book. I don't know how long I sat there, staring, unable to breathe. Then I heard the whisper, not in my head, not in my ears, from the book. It told me the truth. The book wasn't just a guide. It wasn't just magic. It was a hunger. Every tattoo I made, every drop of ink infused with blood, was feeding it. And now I was part of it. I tried to run, tried to burn the book, tear it apart. But every time I did, the missing patch of skin on my arm grew. More paper, more ink. My own body was becoming a new page. And I'm not the first. I finally understand now. The cover, the strange, leathery texture, the stretched, cracked surface. It wasn't leather, it was skin. And someday, when the book is ready, when I've fed it enough souls, it will take the rest of me, and I will be the next cover. I used to work as a pizza delivery driver when I was in college. It wasn't a bad job, decent tips, flexible hours, and most of the time, I didn't have to deal with people for too long. But one night, I had a delivery that still haunts me to this day. It was late, almost 11:30 p.m., and I was just about to finish my shift when the order came in. The address was unfamiliar, a house way out on the edge of town, past where most of the neighborhoods ended. My manager asked if I wanted to take it, and since it was my last delivery, I figured I'd do it and head home. I plugged the address into my GPS and started driving. The farther I went, the fewer houses there were. The streetlights became more spaced out, and eventually I was driving down a long, dark road surrounded by trees. My headlights were the only source of light, and the road felt endless. Finally, I saw it. A house at the very end of the road. It looked old, like it had been there for decades, maybe longer. There were no other houses nearby, just thick woods on either side. The porch light was on, but the rest of the house was completely dark. No lights in the windows, no signs of movement inside. I pulled up, grabbed the pizza, and walked to the door. The air felt heavy, almost too still. Something about the place unsettled me, but I figured it was just because of how isolated it was. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to knock a third time when I heard it. A sound coming from inside the house. It was faint, but it sounded like whispering. Multiple voices, too quiet to make out what they were saying. I took a step back. My first thought was that someone had placed a prank order and was trying to mess with me. Then I noticed something even stranger. The door was slightly open, just a crack. That door hadn't been open when I knocked. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see inside. The hallway beyond was completely dark, and the whispering stopped the second I moved. A wave of unease washed over me. Something was off. I decided to just leave. No tip was worth this level of creepiness. As I turned to walk back to my car, a voice called out from inside the house. Low, raspy, almost too quiet to hear. Don't go. I stopped. Every hair on my body stood on end. I turned back toward the door, my heart pounding. Your pizza's here, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then the door slowly creaked open a little more. The hallway was still pitch black, but now I could see the edge of a staircase leading up to the second floor. The air coming from inside felt cold, like the house had been abandoned for a long time. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go inside, but I also didn't want to just stand there. Then out of the darkness, I saw something move. A shape, barely visible in the shadows at the top of the stairs. It was tall, too tall for a normal person, and it stood completely still. I took a step back. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but my legs felt frozen. Then the whispering started again. But this time, It was coming from right next to me. I spun around expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. That was it. I dropped the pizza box on the porch and bolted to my car. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I yanked open the door and jumped inside. As I started the engine, my headlights lit up the house. The front door was wide open now, and in the doorway, just beyond the reach of the light, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its head was tilted at an unnatural angle. It wasn't moving. It was just watching me. I slammed my car into reverse and sped out of there, not looking back. My heart didn't stop pounding until I was miles away, back in town, where there were people, streetlights, and safety. The next day, I told my manager about it. He looked up the address, confused, and then said something that made my blood run cold. That house? That place burned down years ago. No one lives there. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said I wasn't taking any more deliveries out there. Ever. I still don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if someone was really there or if something else was in that house, waiting. But I do know one thing. When I was running to my car, just before I shut the door, I swear I heard that same raspy whisper. Don't go. And that wraps up today's story. I really hope it resonated with you or gave you something to think about. Stories like these are what keep me passionate about creating, and your support makes it all worthwhile. If you've got any thoughts, opinions, or even your own experiences to share, don't hold back. Drop them in the comments. I'd love to start a conversation and hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, make sure you stick around. I've got plenty more coming that I think you'll love. Thanks so much for watching, for being here, and for supporting this journey. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.